One of the best ways to interpret history is through the symbols the ancients used. There's many instances where we find the exact same ones being used on opposite sides of the world. It's uncanny in some cases, but there's one symbol that transcends them all, and there's not a single culture in history that hasn't used it in some way. And once you understand what this symbol is and what it means, you start to see it everywhere you look in history. I'm of course talking about the squatter man. Sure, you might say, that's a common symbol on old petroglyphs, rock carvings, and other things made by hunter-gatherers and Stone Age people. But that's all. That's completely incorrect. The squatter man symbol is actually found in all of the later and more advanced civilizations too. Every single one of them. And there's a handful of other symbols I'll show you too, that are also pretty prolific and found alongside the squatter man in many of these cases. So let's take a deeper look here. First, let me show you how extensive the use of this symbol goes, and then we'll get into the different theories on what exactly it might mean. So, like I said before, the earliest use of the squatter man was drawn on rocks in as diverse of places as Australia, Asia, the Americas, Pacific Islands, Africa, Europe, and literally all 7 continents except Antarctica. They all show the exact same thing, a stick figure type humanoid drawing in this specific squatting position. Oftentimes it'll have dots on either sides, or multiple limbs, or sometimes instead of the specific squat position, it's down on one knee. You'll see what I mean here in a second. But it's often found alongside other symbols as well. The concentric circle petroglyph, the labyrinth petroglyph, crosses, swastika-like symbols, and oftentimes very peculiar looking otherworldly type beings, gods and the like. Take a look at some of these. They're everywhere. It's absolutely mind-boggling how often you see this symbol in Stone Age petroglyphs. All over the Americas. It's in Canada, up in Alaska, the Southwest deserts, all over the West Coast, in the Great Lakes region, even among the eastern US tribes. It's found down in Mexico and Central America, even in the Caribbean. It's all over South America, Peru, Chile. Even deep in the Amazon, there are rocks that show the squatter man petroglyph in some of the most isolated pockets of the world. And like we said, it's found over in Australia, New Zealand, all over the Pacific Islands, Hawaii, Easter Island, Guam, French Polynesia, on the Marquesas Islands, Tahiti, Tonga, the Solomon Islands, New Caledonia, and Papua New Guinea. It's also all over Asia, in China, Japan, up in Siberia in various places, down in India, and in Southeastern Asia and Indonesia. It's also found in some places around the Middle East, in Iran, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Armenia, Israel, Iraq, and Yemen. And then it's found in every corner of Africa as well. Here's a few examples from a handful of African nations. And then yes, it's all over Europe as well. It's been found in Spain, Italy, Malta, and all over the northern regions in places like Sweden, Norway, Finland, Russia, and I'm sure there's many I missed. The point is, it's everywhere, especially among these extremely ancient cultures. It's almost as if it was all one culture. But how is that even possible? Alright, but it doesn't end there. The symbol was never lost. It just became more detailed and complex, but the meaning was still the same. Like I said, when you know what to look for, you start seeing it everywhere. It's still, to this day, a huge part of many cultures and religions in our modern world. We just don't fully realize it. We've lost the meaning behind it somewhere along the way. But it's still there, hidden behind decadence and tradition. And I think we can really learn a lot about what it actually means based on how it was adapted into these later cultures and religions. So what am I talking about? Well, let's take a look. But before we do that, I just wanted to quick show you guys our new t-shirts. If you go to talesoftheoldworld.com, you can find our huge selection of historical t-shirts. Some of the ones that I particularly enjoy is this one. Local carpenter continues to spread disinformation deemed harmful by religious experts. I thought this one was pretty funny too. The giant fucking triangles one. There's also the flooded again one, that's a good one. And then there's a bunch that feature beautiful historical artworks that look great on a t-shirt. So go check those out at talesoftheoldworld.com. And thanks you guys for helping support the channel. All right, back to the video. All right, so first, the most quintessential adaptation of the Squatter Man in later traditions is found in Hinduism. The god Shiva is the Squatter Man. Oftentimes, scholars, when explaining what the Squatter Man petroglyph represents, call it the dancer or dancing shaman. And that's exactly what Shiva is. The cosmic dance of destruction. Shiva's dance marking the passing of time and the turning of the ages. Shiva is the destroyer god, the one who, when he dances, destroys the entire universe, ushering in the turning of the ages and new creation. And how is this represented in Hindu art going back all the way to the Indus Valley? As a multi-armed god posing with one leg raised and the other bent, a very specific pose. You don't see ancient Hindus ever veering from this depiction. It's always the same. And you'll see a lot of connections to some other ones that we're going to talk about in a minute when you look at the various depictions of Shiva. The weapons he holds, the frills or serpents coming from behind him, the multi-arms, and in the Indus Valley tradition, what they call a proto-Shiva is shown as a horned god, also in the Squatter Man pose. Just keep these images and meanings in mind when we look at more of these from all over. Alright, so let's travel over to the Americas, where we find a sort of lost ancient culture that we know very little about, because they were already wiped out when the Europeans arrived in the late 15th century and 16th century. The Mississippians, or mound builders. At some of the most prominent mound sites, Cahokia, Poverty Point, Etowah Mounds, Spiro Mounds, and many more, we find they had one main figure they preferred to show in their art and artifacts, the bird man, or bird shaman. And when we look at how they represented him, it's the same as Shiva doing the cosmic dance of destruction, down on one knee, the other bent, frills and feathers coming off of him, holding traditional staffs and ceremonial weapons that look similar, often the cross symbol, and depicted dancing inside a circle, oftentimes with spider symbols similar to the labyrinth petroglyphs, pre-Columbian swastika symbols, and often surrounded by an Ouroboros snake eating its own tail. And many point to the feathered depiction as a connection to the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl among the Toltec and later Aztec. Perhaps maybe that god represents the same Squatter Man. We do see Quetzalcoatl depicted in the Ouroboros as well in Mexico, so maybe there's a connection there. And some very old depictions of him in his human form, he's doing a similar squat pose on one knee and holding some of the same objects. The cross. He's shown with frills and feathers, just like the Birdman, and surrounded by all kinds of serpent symbolism. And these aren't the only Native American tribes to have this connection. A lot of people have concluded that some of the traditional dances shamans do is exactly what the Birdman shaman was depicted doing. And it's the same thing Shiva is shown doing. A dance representing the passing of time and the changing of cycles, the cosmic dance of destruction. Alright, then if we travel down to South America, we find their main god among the majority of the civilizations going all the way back to the earliest people in Peru and Chile. Way before the Inca, worshipped the sun god Viracocha, or something similar. Again, a lot of these are depicted as sun gods. More on that later. But Viracocha is always shown in the same way. Not exactly squatting with his legs, but doing the same position with his arms the Squatter Man petroglyph does. Holding them straight out, and then he's shown holding two spears or scepter-like objects. These are interpreted in different ways, but some have said they're thunderbolts, representing Viracocha's power over storms and weather, and creation. He's also shown with ray-like things coming from his head, representing the sun. And if you look close enough at some of these, you can see they're actually serpents, exactly like Shiva, with the Naga snakes shown behind his head. A very common motif in ancient Hindu art, representing spiritual wisdom, divine protection, and mastery over the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. And then lastly, Viracocha is usually shown surrounded by these winged figures. Some with human heads, some with bird heads, all with wings. They're interpreted as divine protectors, angelic-like beings that serve the sun god. Very similar to later depictions of angels and spiritual beings. we actually find something that looks almost exactly the same on the complete opposite side of the world, in Mesopotamia, at the Temple of Oannes. And there are more detailed depictions of these creatures all throughout ancient Mesopotamian artifacts and stone carvings. And then over in Egypt, we have a very interesting representation of the squatting god. The god known as He, whose name literally means flood, nodding to the primordial flood waters that came before creation. This god represented infinity or eternity. He's known for coming together with a group of several other gods to create cataclysmic events that give rise to the sun and the deity that represents it, Atum. He's major role in creation was largely to provide an infinite backdrop for creation, allowing the other gods limitless space and potential to bring forth the universe's first elements. Also often depicted as assisting the sky god Nut in holding up the heavens and sky. And He can usually be seen in this squatting on one knee pose, also holding two staffs like Viracocha. Are you starting to see how crazy all these connections are? Let's continue. Alright, let's look over in ancient Greek traditions. A god that's often depicted in the exact same squatter pose is Hermes, the messenger god and keeper of the caduceus staff. And for some reason he's depicted in ancient art as going down on one knee, just like Shiva, the Birdman, and many others. And then there's the Gigenes from Greek mythology, a race of 6-armed creatures who for some reason are depicted down on one knee with their multi-arms, looking exactly like Shiva does, doing his dance of destruction. Then there's plenty more. In Polynesian traditions, they depict their tiki deity in this squatting pose, with raised arms, showing the exact same motif as the squatter man. The tiki was a sort of creator or ancestral protector figure. And the Dogon in West Africa have the Kanaga masks and stick figures with raised arm, a sort of dynamic stick man, just like the squatter man, known to them as the sky beings. And then at Göbekli Tepe, we have the goddess figure squatting. This one is interesting. It's shown as a woman giving birth, and we can see this exact woman giving birth symbol in a lot of different places too, and she's in the exact squatter pose, so maybe there's some big connection there that we could get into. But we find this over in Polynesia, and then we find this in Irish Celtic traditions too. This explicitly squatting female figure, said to represent fertility and power, going all the way back to prehistoric motifs. And I've seen this in a few other places as well. Let me know in the comments if you can think of any other ones. We also have the Chinese longevity symbol that many have said looks like a squatter man. And then in Norse and Germanic, we also have some early artifacts with one-knee gods holding staffs, Odin or Freyr variants. In Babylonian and Sumerian traditions, we find the thunderbolt god Marduk, shown in dynamic poses throwing his thunderbolt, another motif that's very closely connected to the squatter man. I actually have a whole video on thunderbolt gods, so go check that out if you want to go down that rabbit hole, but they have some major connections to these squatter man gods as well. Zeus is often depicted in a squat-like pose, holding up the sky, or hurling a thunderbolt in a raised arm stance. And they always have that same weapon, just like Viracocha, just like Zeus, the thunder god in Hinduism, Indra, and there's many others. Some people say that the squatter man pose is the same pose that these thunder gods do when they're throwing their thunderbolt. And we see that going back all the way to Mesopotamian traditions. And for some reason, the thunderbolt weapon always looks the same. It's that 3-pronged, double-sided sort of staff, what they call a vajra in Hindu traditions, which looks like some piece of ancient lost technology. But I digress. Go check out that video if you want to go deeper into that subject. Now, let's get into the different theories surrounding this symbol, because something this widespread isn't just a coincidence or some shared dormant human memory or something. It had a singular meaning that all these ancient Stone Age cultures understood, and it was slowly lost as the symbol was inducted into later pagan religions and representations of certain gods. The mainstream idea around why this symbol is so widespread is extremely simple and basic. They literally will tell you to your face that this way to draw a stick figure human in this specific squatting pose was just a natural occurrence, and all these different cultures came up with it completely independently of each other. They say that the human body can only be drawn in so many ways, and the stick figure is a simplistic and the most likely way early man would depict themselves. But that doesn't explain at all why they all have the petroglyph in the same exact pose, or why this symbol was so heavily adopted into later pagan traditions. Mainstream scholars also will often claim that this symbol was slowly diffused around the world over thousands of years. They claim it began in places like China, on Yangshan pottery, or at Göbekli Tepe, like I showed you a minute ago, and just slowly found its way to surrounding cultures and eventually over several thousand years all over the world. But I don't think the people who came up with this idea really understand how widespread the symbol really is. How can something, a simple drawing of a stick figure man in that specific squatting pose, make its way out of China and Göbekli Tepe all the way to the most remote regions of the world? Tiny little islands in the Pacific have rocks covered in this symbol. Small tribes in the most isolated parts of the Americas used this symbol. We've even found it deep in the Amazon rainforest, where there's tribes that still have no idea a futuristic, modern, technological society completely surrounds them. How could this symbol have reached them when the modern world still hasn't even reached them? And what reason would all these people have to venerate it and use it so often in their art and writings? Unless this symbol represented a worldwide phenomenon that every single person alive at the time experienced, and it could only be described using this one symbol. As always, mainstream historians, archaeologists, and other scholars don't look deep enough at the connections between cultures and the undeniable fact that every single group on Earth had this symbol. They close their minds off and just brush it off as human nature to draw a squatting stick figure man, which in my opinion is just ridiculously lazy and a cope. The reality of it is that the squatter man represents something of extreme importance to the ancient world. But what that is specifically, we don't know for sure. But there is one theory that seems to make more sense than all the rest: the plasma discharge theory. This is primarily the work of Anthony L. Peratt, a plasma physicist who worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory. It proposes that the globally widespread petroglyph motif, a stick figure with raised and bent arms, legs in a squat or one knee raised in the dynamic pose, often with dots or circles on either side. It's not a generic human or shaman or dancer, but a literal record of a high-energy plasma event witnessed in the sky at some very ancient moment in human history. Peratt spent decades studying high-current Z-pinch plasma discharges in laboratory settings and simulations. In a Z-pinch, intense electrical currents flow through a plasma column, causing it to self-compress or pinch due to its own magnetic field. This creates predictable instabilities and shapes. He identified some key plasma structures: a central linear current or column, stacked toroidal donuts, ring-like structures around it, and when viewed from the side, perpendicular to the column, the toroids flatten or warp under the magnetic forces, and the overall form looks like a humanoid figure with upraised arms and a squat or dynamic leg position. The side dots and circles are the toroids or current filaments, seen edge on. The figure can appear multi-limbed or with extra features during different instability phases. Peratt compared lab photos and simulations directly to tens of thousands of petroglyphs from over 139 countries in his database, and the match was striking, especially for the squatter man variant. He published this in the IEEE Transactions on Plasma Science in 2003. It's called Characteristics for the Occurrence of High Current Z-Pinch Aurora, as recorded in antiquity. Peratt and his collaborators date the events roughly to 10,000 to 14,000 years ago, lining up perfectly with the end of the Pleistocene and onset of the Younger Dryas events. This aligns perfectly with the abrupt climate shifts and megafauna extinctions, possibly caused by solar outbursts or planetary electrical interactions, showing that our solar system is more unstable than we previously thought. The plasma column itself became the mythic axis mundi, the world axis or world tree, another motif we see across almost all ancient cultures, linking the sky to Earth in global mythology. This theory suggests humanity witnessed a catastrophic space weather event that was seared into the collective memory, later mythologized as creation and destruction gods. This was something like the Carrington event in 1859 cranked up to 1,000. The sun turned on us and released such a massive plasma discharge, it not only changed our entire climate, flash freezing and plunging us right back into an ice age, and wiped out a huge number of humans and almost all the megafauna species, but it also left a streak of plasma and aurora in the sky that was so extreme, there's no comparison we can make to something we've experienced in modern history. And it left such a mark on the human psyche that every single culture and religion can find some version of this extreme ancient cataclysmic memory. This event would have caused massive discharges of electricity, as all that energy was absorbed by the Earth. Many have theorized that huge blasts of electricity hit certain parts of Earth, and the scars can still be seen. And when you know what you're looking for, it's pretty obvious. Look at the Grand Canyon, for example. Many have theorized that an event like this plasma discharge we're talking about, around 12,000 years ago, was what created the Grand Canyon. Whether this happened tens of thousands of years ago or recently is up for debate. But you can literally see the electrical signature in the very shape of the canyon itself. Water flowing and eroding Earth doesn't shape things like that. Rivers are not shaped like that. But electricity makes these exact signatures wherever it burns. Again, further linking this event to the thunder gods and their great thunderbolt weapon and hammer, or axe as they're usually depicted with. In Norse mythology, in the end times, when Ragnarok takes place, the thunder god Thor uses the last of his strength to launch one last mighty swing of his hammer, killing the great serpent Jormungandr. But during their great battle, the serpent struck Thor and infected him with his venomous bite, and just as Thor walked away from the battle, it says he took 9 steps and then succumbed to the venom, dying on the spot. The last thing I'll leave you with is this. The best example I can give you of what this might have looked like. Lightning sprites. Huge bursts of plasma that can rarely be seen above massive thunderstorms in the upper atmosphere. And they look like god figures looking over the earth. Unlike normal lightning, these are dense plasma bursts that often take the shape of a humanoid or spirit. Now imagine this, but worldwide. Alright, that's all we have for today. Let me know what you think of this theory down in the comments, and don't forget to go check out our t-shirts at talesoftheoldworld.com. And if you want to help support our channel, you can go check out our Patreon and watch these videos ad-free for just a few bucks a month. Thank you all for watching and supporting the channel. I'll see you in the next one.